start on hey, always on the bottom of the page. The last Rashi over here, they were talking about why they allowed the Beis Din to go ahead and take out the kilayim on Chol Hamoed. And they say because people weren't working, so the work was cheap. And the Gemara says that means that who pays for the work that the Beis Din sends them to tear out the kilayim? He says it must be that Beis Din pays for that. That's why Beis Din was concerned that it should cost less for Hegdish. But if the people paid for it, for removing the kilayim, so let them pay for it. Why Beis Din would not be concerned with that? So that's how the Gemara concludes that it was them. Okay, so we have one more piece of Gemara over here to finish up in this idea. Zog the Gemara, Ba'at Kamo. So how much mixture? So you have a you have an orchard, and then you have mixed in. How much of the mixture makes kilayim is considered? Do we have the provision? Ba'at Kamo. Ba'at Kamo havi kilayim. Up to how much? Up to how much mixture is it kilayim, the chayiv levatloid, so that you're obligated to remove it, to destroy it? How much is it to destroy it? Zog the Gemara, Omar Rab Shmuel Bar Yitzchok. Rab Shmuel Bar Yitzchok said, Ke oiso sheshaninu. This is like that which we learned in the and I think it's the Brisa, that kol so that's a measurement. Sheyesh bo roiva zera mimin achar. A saw, Rashi says, is a quarter of a kav. A kav is 1/24 of a saw. So if you have within a saw, you have a roiva, zera, a seed, mimin achar, from another type, yemait, then you have to diminish. So you have to remove and make it less than the roiva kav. Basically, up till a quarter of a kav, you can leave it there. But if you have more, then you have to diminish it. That would be considered a mixture, and that would be kilayim. So you can't have two different kinds. You can't have, that's called kilayim, when you mix two different seeds from different variations. You can't have them mixed. They have to be each one planted in their own set, not mixed in between the others. But how much of the mixture makes it kilayim has to be a quarter of a kav. So we say yimait. So hochi goras yimait. So which means she'im zora reiva hakav. If you sowed a quarter of a kav, yimateno biyakreno, you should diminish it and uproot it to make it less than that. You don't have to. You don't have to. The rest of the field is okay. But if you sowed a quarter of a kav. You can't, Rashi says you have to diminish it and you have to uproot it. I guess if it's less than a quarter of a kav sown, then it doesn't really, in such a big area, in an area of a saw, in a field of a saw, to put in a quarter of a kav is not considered to be anything. If it is a quarter of a saw, a quarter of a kav, then you must rip it out. And what happens is, if Beis Din sent out the agents and they looked around and they saw how much of these different mixtures there are, and Rashi talks here about sowing, not what they found so much, but that means if they found a Revakav, that means that's how much that they sowed it then, I guess. As we'll see, the time of the year they go out, that's the time when they're sowing the fields. So what happens if the person sowed less than a quarter of a kav? I mean, just a handful, let's say, then it doesn't matter. We don't, I guess that's bottled. Frag the Gemara, but Tanya, but didn't we learn in the Braise, his skinu sheyehu mafkirin kol hasode kulam. The rabbis instituted, if we came to your field, if the agents of the Beis Din came to somebody's field and they saw there was kilayim over there, so then they would say the whole field of that person becomes hefker, becomes ownerless. Beis Din has the authority to be mafkir, other people's property. So the rabbis instituted that in a case like that, they would, because you went and you sowed kilayim, we would make your whole field hefker. So how come over here it says yimayet? Yimayet means you just remove the kilayim, but it doesn't say the field is hefker. So Rashi, Botanya, Kolasodekulo, that Ovid, V'at, Amrit Yimayet. So how could you say Yimayet, that he should make it less when you have to, the whole field is prohibited. And the Gemara says, Loi Kashya, this is not a question, not a problem, it's not difficult, because Kan Koidem Takone, our Braise is talking about before the Takone. And Kan, and the second Braise is talking about La'achara Takone. Here what happens, very interesting. The Gemara relates, the Gemara brings a Braise, what happened over here. The Tanya, in the beginning, Barishoina, in the first place, when the Beis Din would go around looking who has kilayim in their fields. So what did they do? So they would uproot the kilayim. Umashlichim lifnei behemtam. They would throw it in front of the people's animals, so that was feed for their animals. And v'hoyu balei batim smeichim shtei simchas. So these owners, they were rejoicing. They had two happy moments over here. Why? Achas, number one, sheminachshim lohem sodiseyim, that they would prune their fields for them, because by removing, I guess, some of this other stuff, they fall down there by accident, they drop them over there. So now they have the shluchei Beis Din cleaning up their fields from these, like let's say they planted wheat, and then you have barley stuck in there in the middle. So you have the shluchei Beis Din coming in, picking out the barley from there, or a little barley in the field over there. Oh, they say so. They're happy. They get their fields cleaned out by them. That's number one. Rashi Nachshon so the same. Shluchei Bezdin Mishalahem. The Shluchei Bezdin theirs, because as we said before, they pay for it. They don't have to pay them. So because when they remove the kilayim, so the field is by itself is pruned. I'm wondering. I think maybe Menachshin, maybe the field is being the field is being turned over. Yeah. Okay, but in any event, they were happy with the work that the Beis Din did for them. Number two, the achas, and the other thing is shemashlichim lifnei behemtim. They throw it in front of their animals, so at least they don't have to bother feeding their animals. They take the kilayim or what they are picking out, and they're throwing it in front of the animals, so they're very happy. Iskinu, so the rabbis weren't happy with that the people are planting it so that the Beis Din should come and take it out. So they instituted that they should uproot it and they throw it on the streets. So they don't get the benefit that they're feeding the animals. So the Gemara, but and yet they were still very happy. Why should Menachshim? So they're saying they would still pick out from their fields. So okay, so they didn't have the second benefit. So the rabbis instituted that they should make ownerless the entire field. So the person is not going to do it anymore, because if he's going to do it, he's going to end up losing his field. And that way, based in so in our Mishnahs, the first statement where it says they uprooted, that's before it came and they instituted to make it hefker. And in the second brisa is talking about after they instituted, and that's why they made it hefker. Next Mishnah. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Omer. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says, Moshchin es hamayin me'ilon le'ilon. That you can pull the water from one tree to the next tree. In a field, we had two kinds of fields. We had a beis hashlochim, which you need to water all the time. It's a loss. In this case, the trees need the water, so we can do it on Chol HaMoed, on Moed. You can do it because it's something necessary. Rashi says, "Moshchen hamayim me'ilon le'ilon, dahavi kisedei beis hashlochim." That is considered like a field of a beis hashlochim. Why? The pseida yiseda ikar. Because there is a lot of loss. If you're not going to water the trees, it's going to be a big loss. So it's treated like a field that needs to be watered, so you can also draw pull the water from one tree to the next tree. Abol lo yashkes asuda kula, but you cannot water the entire field as they base habal. That's a field which gets the rainwater from sufficient for it, so that you can't do because that's doesn't need it. The trees specifically need the water, so that's treated more like Beis Hashlochim, but the rest of the field doesn't need it, and therefore you're not allowed to do that. That's why the Mishnah says ubilvad shelo yashkes kol hasoda, provided that he doesn't water the entire field, because we're not letting you water the field. We're only letting you pull the water from tree to tree because that's necessary. What is the din? Zroim shelo yishosu lifnei hamoyed. If you have vegetations that you hadn't watered before Yontif, so you didn't start watering it yet, don't start it on Chol Hamoed. Zroim shelo yishosu lifnei hamoyed shelo hoyu melumodim lishtos tomid. We're not used to always watering them. Lifnei hamoyed, they didn't get lo yashkim b'moyed. Don't start watering them on Chol Hamoed. Lo yashkim b'moyed, Zok Rashi, the hoyil v'lo mashkiluhu todi lifnei hamoyed. Since he does not water them all the time before the Yontif, so there's no loss lahavilei pseidei lamashkilu b'moyed. So there will not be a loss to you if you don't water it during the Yontif. You didn't water it the whole time, so don't start on Yontif, to watering it. So you can't do that. If you did it before, then you can continue on Chol Hamoed. And the Gemara says, "V'chachomim matirim b'zeh u'b'zeh," and the Chachomim allow in both, which means lahashkis as kol hasoda kula. First of all, they allow to water the entire field, and also not like the stipulation of Lesben Yaakov said shelo yashkis kol hasoda. So they say you can. However, and also even if you have vegetations that have not yet been watered before Yontif, you can also go ahead and water it on Yontif. So the Gemara says, "V'hai chachomim." This opinion of chachomim, Hein Rab Meir the Amar Li'il. That is the opinion of Rab Meir, who said earlier, "Mashkin mimenu afilus dei beis habal," that you can water. We're talking there from the well, even as dei beis habal, even if it's watered, he's lenient. He is the one that permits here to do the whole field and to do the vegetations, even though you did not start it before Yom Tov. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Gemara says Rabbi Yehuda, Im hoisa soda metunenes, if it was a so he says it depends really on the field. Im hoisa soda metunenes, if it was a dried out field, then mutter, then it's permissible. Meaning it's an exception if it's a dried out field. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, He explains. Hodom Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov. This is that Rabbi Lezer said, Avalo Yashkes Asodekulo, that you're not allowed to water the entire field. Aval im hoiso sode mitunenes. If it was a field, mitunenes means leicha v'yivesha. Lacha leicha means moist and dry. What does it mean, moist and dry? It was we'll see the Gemara. The Gemara says, I thought the Gemara teaches it. I understood it means a dried out, a parched land, then you're allowed to water it. Afagav, the habits they base habal, even though it gets the rain from the rainwater, it gets the water. So Rashi says, Leicha v'yofsha. Sorry, try that. It was moist in the beginning and then it dried out. So even though it says Devi Sabal, the keep on the Havi Leicha ad Hashto, since it was moist till now, Ile Mashkilu lo Havi Pseda Yisera. If you're not going to water it, that's going to be a big loss. So basically, if it was a dried out, it was moist and dried out, it needs water now, and you can't just rely on the water that comes from this day habal that comes from the rain. Tanya nami hochi. We also learned so in Abraisa. Kisha amru osru lahashkoitson b'moyed. This that we said that you're not allowed to water them on Yom Tov. He's talking about now the vegetation. So he says, when they said that you can't water them on the Yom Tov, so they only talked about those vegetations that have not been watered before Yom Tov. So they're not been watered, so you can't go and water them on Yom Tov. That's the other halacha that we said before, that you can't do it on Yom Tov. The avol zroim sheshasu lifnei hamoyed. But if you have vegetation that were watered before Yom Tov, then muter lahashkoisam b'moyed, you're allowed to, because if you're not going to water them on Chol HaMoed, it's going to be a big loss. Then we're talking about vegetation. Vegetation, you need to water all the time. But if you didn't water it before, then don't start on Chol HaMoed. Then it says, Im hoiso sode mutunenes. It was a dried out land. It was moist land. Muter is permissible. Further, it says in this Raisa, "Ve'ein mashkin sode gerid b'moyed." A field which is a gerid. What is a gerid field? That was dried out always. Sode gerid yevesha me'elam. It has always been dried. Shein tzorech lashkoisa. You don't need to water it. I guess it's the watering it isn't going to help it. Let's see what the Gemara says. The Chachamim matirim bazeh bazeh. The Chachamim permit in both cases by besod gerid ubizroim shelishos lifnei hamoyed, and the parched field and Zra'im that have not seed, vegetation that does not water before Yom Tov, he allows. Again, this is Chomish Rameir, Rashi said before, who is lenient. Okay. Omar Rabina, says Rabina, Shema Mino, so what do we learn from this halacha? The fact that he says, that high tarbitza. So we learn like this, that this tarbitza is a garden, Shori li tarbutzi b'choyle demoyed. Tarbutzi means to sprinkle. There's a difference between watering, which you pour a lot of water, or sprinkle with water. So he's talking the garden, you're allowed to tarbutzi, shori li tarbutzi, b'choyle shemoyed. Rashi says, shori li tarbutzi, lizalif all of mine, to throw water on it, afal gav, the lack of Seder. Even though there's no loss, because here you see that he is matir. So you could pour water on the garden, because according to everybody, all opinions said that you can water the garden. Rashi says, what does the tarbutzi means? Lahashkos, to water. That comes from the Loshen. The tarbutzi is lahashkos. This is Loshen, ein mechabdin, ve'ein marbitzin. Like you say, you don't sweep. When you sweep the floor, sweep is called mechabdin. Marbitzin is when you put some water so the dust doesn't rise up. So that's called marbitzin. That's the word. Which Rashi says, Hainu hashkoa purto. That's a little bit of water, not fully. Kidei sheyetzu hayirokis, enough for the vegetables to come out. Ukedemefarish beidach beraisa lekamei, as explained in the next brisa later on. So the garden, you could sprinkle it a little bit with water. That's okay. Umashkin, but when it uses the word mashkin, hainu hashkoa gemura shel beis hashalchim. That means fully water. That means to pour a lot of water in the beis hashalchim, where you gotta bring the water there. So the tarbutzi is allowed to, because that would. Why? How do we know this? Because it says soto gerid my time. So what would be the reason why the Chachamim allow this dried out land? The aflo mashvilo charfa. This the watering that he does makes it's not fully, but it makes it a better piece. Rashi says mashvilo charfa makes it a aflo l'shavya charfa. It says like this: the lack of pseida, there is no pseida over there. Va'afilo hochi shori lahashkoisa kach ulashbicha. He's still allowed to improve it like that, and to improve it. Hochinami begina marbitzin. So the same thing is, by the garden, you are allowed to sprinkle the water. Hochinami Aflo mashvilo charpo. Um, the sprinkling of the water that you're gonna do on the garden is gonna make it improve it. So apparently, when you need to improve it, that is something which is allowed. It looks like he rules like the Chachamim, because so the grid, according to the mayor, is not allowed. I mean, according to the Tanakama, the Mashkin saw the grid b'moyed. So the Mashkin saw the grid b'moyed. He passes, he learns it from the Soda Grid. So apparently that's the halacha. All right. Let's leave it over here today. We need to have a little more gardening experience to really understand, the agriculture, how things work. But just a short word. So we're doing the Parshas Va'era, and it seems like on one hand, God is upset with Moshe Rabbeinu because Moshe Rabbeinu was complaining to Hashem, and he said, "Why'd you send me to Pharaoh? The Pharaoh made it even worse for them." And it seems like on one hand, Hashem is upset with him because he says, "I miss Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. They had challenges, and they never complained. And you are complaining." But the truth of the matter is, it would seem, there's a big distinction between the Avis and Avram and Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu was complaining for the Jewish people. It wasn't about Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have to work. Moshe Rabbeinu was free. He wasn't in the Shibud of Mitzrayim. And he didn't really want to go to Paro. Hashem basically twisted his arms. And then Hashem sends him. It means that Moshe Rabbeinu was so important once he accepted the mission of being a shaliach from the Eibishter to lead the Jewish people, that even if it required him to be talking to Hashem in a way of complaining or disrespectful, saying to Hashem, Lo ma'are oiso la'om hazeh, he did it, but he didn't do it for his own sake. Actually, we learn the qualities of a real Jewish leader, that he puts himself aside. By Moshe Rabbeinu, we find this even later on. Find it a lot later on, that Moshe Rabbeinu interceded on all the people, even the people that did Averis. When Avram was praying for the people, he was looking for tzaddikim. He says, maybe there is 50 tzaddikim, maybe there's 10 tzaddikim, 20. He was looking for tzaddikim. But once Hashem said, well, there's no tzaddikim here, so goodbye. So he left. He accepted. But Moshe Rabbeinu, no. The people sinned with the ego. They just, he went up for 40 days, and immediately they failed and did the worst sin possible. And yet Moshe Rabbeinu interceded on their behalf. He says, if you're not going to forgive them, I want to be erased from the Torah. I don't even want anything to do with the Torah. So you see this connection of Moshe Rabbeinu and his devotion and his insistence for the Jewish people. And that's really a leader. And that's why real leaders don't run. Today they run for office. They don't even walk for office, but they run for office but people who really value the responsibility and really want to work for the people, they realize the dedication and that you have to give up and you have to serve the people and you have to be there for them. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu did whatever he could in order to intercede on the people. In a similar way, we see by all true leaders, and we also see like by the Rebbe who Yud Shvat, Chodesh is already coming up. The Shabbos Mevorchim, the Shabbos of Shvat, the 10th of Shvat is the day that the Rebbe became Rebbe. But we see the Rebbe as a leader. First of all, just like Moshe Rabbeinu, he refused. Took a whole year to get the Rebbe to accept it because the Rebbe gave in because that was the mission that Hashem wanted him to do. So he gave in. But the Rebbe interceded for all people, whether the righteous people, of course, the Rebbe helps everybody, but especially people who so many people have given up on and said, this guy is evil, he's a Russia, he's no good, there's nothing to do about it. But the Rebbe said, no, we don't give up on any Jew, on nobody. And the Rebbe taught to his followers and to anybody who would listen that the Jewish soul has inherent spark, has a soul which is stronger and can shine and overcome all obstacles. So that's a true leader. Sometimes you have to talk to Hashem. Rebbe would say, Ad Mosai, we want Mashiach now. Some people would say, well, the Eibishter knows what to do. You don't have to tell him what to do. The Eibishter won't. He'll bring Mashiach. Why do I have to tell him? We know better what we need. But if somebody is hurting and is in pain and he wants to see the Jewish people out of exile, wants to see them elevated to the highest of level, he screams and he says, why did you do bad for these people? Bring us Mashiach, bring us the Geula. Hope everybody has a good week. I'm still recovering a little bit under the weather. That's why my voice is a little bit faint a little bit. But hope to see everybody next week, Mr. Shem, fully re-energized.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Ron, feel better.
Thank you. Ron, feel good, Ron.
Thanks.
Okay, hope to hear good news. We'll be in touch.